Hello, 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 and welcome to this month's sip. Uh, this month's sip is what is indigeneity, and I just want everybody to know how long I had to work. I mean, really
I just
work.
want everybody to know.
Oh, backlash! Where is that coming from? That uh, to say indigeneity and actually get it out. It's not as an easy word to say as you think. I'm going to wait to see how many of my panelists mess it up at least once, so I don't feel so bad. If they do, I'm going to assume it's on purpose, so I don't feel like a total loser all by myself. So I appreciate any attempt to make me feel better by mangling this word. We all want to say indigenous instead of indigeneity. Today's topic is what is indigeneity? Um, I am going to be in a moment passing the baton over to Raina Wilson. Raina was the person who came up with the topic. Um, we regularly will poll people about the topic that they would like, that they feel like doesn't get enough attention or people would like to hear about. There are a few things that I want to make clear. One is if you are not on facebook.com/ New Hampshire Metaphysical, you might be watching it on another stream. If you type a question, it's going to go to the stream that you're on. It would go to Patty's or Raina's stream. Um, or Samantha's stream, which is actually not showing up on my feed that we're getting it showing up. So I don't know what's going on. But, anyways, if you are, uh, however, if you are on newhampshiremetaphysical.com, you type in your questions, we will get it. We can bring the questions to the stage. We cannot bring you to the stage. And so let me just take care of the thing. So the first couple of things that I'm going to say is, first of all, for those of you who are here today and also want to like this format of being able to come in, hear four different spiritual experts talk about a subject. Our next one is going to be on 8/16 at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with animal communication. Raina and Patty will be joining us. Sam couldn't make it. She's taking her dog for a walk. But we are going to have Stacy, and I'm going to, oh, she was on the radio show. So if you go to the Dr. Kevin show, where you could be watching it as well right now, and you go back, you are going to see Stacy, who is an animal communicator that's joining us from California. So, wait a second. My animal Raina, are you on Animal Communicator next month?
Uh,
Actually,
I
don't think so. I'm missing somebody. I'll figure it out. I got a month to go. I'm barely getting this one done. What do you want? Uh, so, for those of you who don't know, I am Kevin Ross Emery, inspirational catalyst. Uh, Spiritual interactive panel is one of the things we spun out of New Hampshire Metaphysical, which has now sadly but neededly closed its doors. But we still bring forward those people who followed people on New Hampshire Metaphysical and were part of that group, as well as all the rest of you who may have just stumbled upon us or saw one of the ads. I'm going to let each of the guests introduce themselves and what their connection to the subject is. Raina's going to be taking over a second, and she's going to be kind of, again, this was her topic, so I'm going to let her do that. The only general rule I want to go over is that please remember, we are not here to agree with each other or disagree with each other. This is not a political show, so we don't have to have, that the left hand of the screen is versus the right hand of the screen, and we're going to holler and scream like we're, 2-year-olds that need a nap about how the other one's wrong and horrible and un-American and not human. No, 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 no. This is actually a spiritual interactive panel, but it does not mean that we are going to agree on everything. We're bringing you a bunch of perspectives, and your job is to decide which one resonates to you, or a hybrid. You may say, hey, I like Raina 1.0. I liked Patty's 2.0. I liked Sam's 3.0. And, you know, Kevin's 5.0 knocked it out of the park. So, hey, I have pieced together my thoughts on this subject, and there they are. So, I traditionally will go last, and I'll continue to go last. So, Raina, we'll start with you to take it over. Like, why did you want to do this subject? Why you think it's important? What is your relationship with it? And what do you want to share with our audience?
Yeah, hi. Thank you for hosting this space and this topic, especially too. I'm really, really glad to be here with you and Patty and Samantha. Um, I hear your question about why call this into being and what I hope people to get out of it, and I'll get to that. Um, I just wanted to start sharing from here. Uh, when I'm in a gathering like this, I'm usually holding the energy of it as a circle process, that we're all in it together. And we've all been called to be present in this sip, and all of us together with each of our heart centers that are each already a weaving of the heart of the all and the heart of the earth. We all together also create the heart center of this circle. And so I extend a welcome to all of you here now, and to those who um, will be viewing it in replays. You're all warmly held in circle. That's how I'm holding this energy. So I invite you to attune your attention to your heart being held this way and what that feels like. And as you listen, feel any sensations that arise in your body and sense their need or their message. And you can share any of these reflections in the chat box as we go. This is a way of deep listening that engages your somatic awareness, that connects you to your indigenous sensibilities. Our body and our root signals us, and that is the closest to our knowing and access to spirit. And so developing somatic awareness, which is being able to identify the felt sense of energy moving through your body, it's important. Something that's been lost in our modern Western culture. And so in these sips, we're usually asked to introduce who we are and how we're connected to the topic. And in a typical Western way to answer this question is really with like your function or what you do. And it's a bit more, objectified. But today I'd like to go ahead and answer now from a more indigenous way, which is less about, a collection of labels, but really a way that engages my awareness of self as a process and how I'm connected. And it's in the storytelling. And so I invite you all to share too who you are when you see my example, naming your ancestors, their lands, and where you live now, and the peoples of that land, and how you came to reside there, giving ground to how you're connected, which is an indigenous way. So yeah, I'm Raina. My spirit name is Tanaya. My Lolo, my mother's father was Ilocano from San Antonio, Zambales, and my Lola was Pangasinan. Both of these areas or places are in the islands of what is now called the Philippines. They ran away together and raised a family in Olongapo City. And so my mother then is Tagalog, Tagalog meaning people of the river. It's also the name of the language spoken. Stories have been lost on my father's side where secrets are kept. And after his passing, I was able to confirm he was descended from Celtic, Nordic, and English lineages. And he and my mother met through his service in the Marine Corps. And they came to New Hampshire where his family had been settled for several centuries. And I presently live in the New Hampshire seacoast, part of the land that's originally known as Indigeneity, which is the unceded homeland of the Wabanaki, Pennacook, and Abenaki people, past and present. The spirit of the Norse vulva and also the spirit of the Philippine Babaylan have always called to me since young. And there are stories of seership, dreaming true, spiritual healing, and magical skill on my mother's side of the family. And I am told my Lola Sapuno, or grandmother from the root, or great grandmother, was such a healer, and that she carried the family unting, a talisman that is passed on through generations. And it is swallowed when received and spit back up for the next person when it's time to pass it on. The Babaylan is a mystical woman or trans woman who served multiply as priestess, warrior, seer, teacher, sage, counselor, medium, healer. They're highly regarded community leaders who were slaughtered and fed to the crocodiles, animals that are considered our ancestors in the Philippines when the colonizers came. And so, the Babaylan energies and spirits have guided my shamanic and mystic path since young. As well, I've had several walk-in experiences in a soul braid with an essence of Kuan Yin when I was young, which made Akashic soul memories more accessible to me. And so I recognize the spiritual heritage that vibrates my cells when I'm in connection with Egyptian, Altayan, Buddhist, Hindu, Hebrew Kabbalah, and Delphic oracle wisdom through soul memory. And so all of these are my embodied relational connections to the lands and peoples who are a part of myself, what would be considered the long body by the Iroquois. And this way of knowing it is part of indigeneity. It is relational. It's a wisdom and how we are connected in constant collaborative, nurturing relationship with self, other, community, nature, and the divine through time, past, present, and into the future. And in order to authentically express my connections to other cultural wisdoms, I know it's my responsibility to also create nurturing relationship with those people with grounded awareness of how any of my conditioned upbringing, particularly in this modern Western culture, might perpetuate harm to them. And now, to answer your question, Kevin, why I called for this topic, originally, you wrote that newsletter last fall around indigeneity. And when I read it, I was like, I have a lot to say about that, right? So I just have a lot to share about this. And, I first started to go on a decolonizing and re-indigenizing journey in 2009 when I first saw the word Babaylan. And I finally felt gravity in my body. The ground met me where I was at, and I didn't have to contort myself inside of a limited Western perspective. And since then, I've been reclaiming ground in this process. Humanity has lost a lot in modern Western culture's constructs that normalizes dissociation from our empowered, embodied knowing. And these all came about in its drive for progress and civilization through colonization, a colonization process that required replacing indigenous ways of seeing reality by enforcing that they release their indigenous knowledge systems and practices and adopt the colonizers' values and ways, right? Just cutting them off at the root. And the colonizers first did it to themselves and then proceeded onto the globe with ideas of dominion and resource extraction in the name of modernity. So it was a form of control to demonize, infantilize, pathologize, uncivilize peoples and erase their culture and languages. And these set the path for a culture to perpetuate these harms and habituate us today to hyper-individualism and hyper-independence that keeps us from knowing ourselves, our connections, and tacit wisdoms that arise through our indigenous bodies. And despite progress, we are conditioned to operate against our human nature to ground and connect in ways in this culture. We have relational neurobiology and we're made to connect and understand our strengths from there through each other, interdependence. Neuroscience is just catching up now with somatic, neuroinformed, and trauma-informed therapies, that affirm that connection heals and interdependence fortifies our nervous system. And so, this is really original wisdom. And in my decolonizing, re-indigenizing process, I've learned that all the pathologizing projections upon my differences that still persist to this day, and that I had internalized as macrons about myself, is really just about me being indigenous all along. So it's like very grounding, to have this sort of embrace to my experience. Yeah. And so it's important to start to decouple from the harmful aspects of modern Western perspective, to begin to become aware of one's capacity to do harm and perpetuate harm, as well as reconnect to one's own inner landscape, to learn really how deeply connected we all are to the outer landscape as well, and all its inhabitants, in each other, nature, and the divine, in a more collaborative, nurturing conversation and relationship, particularly with awareness and acknowledgement to those who have endured hardships as a result of displacement and cultural erasure. And so learning to attune your attention to weaving both ground and spirit in your body, coming to the wisdom of your embodied human nature, really it leads to a deeply satisfying life, to feel that groundedness, but access at the same time. And so, this is really just the tip of the iceberg for me on this topic. I've written my decolonizing story, which I presented last year in ceremony with the Center of for Babalan Studies. And you can find this on my site. People's feedback to me about it is when they've read it, they feel seen and understood. And they also feel more love and acceptance of themselves. And it's not just Filipino people who read it, but the feedback has been across the board, culturally. And if you also want to start to deepen or start, your path of re-indigenizing, or just create awareness around what lives in your long body, culturally, I recommend the book Ethno-Autobiography by Jürgen Kramer and R. Jackson Patton, which covers some of these concepts I just spoke about. And my elder, Lenny Strobel, she consulted on it and used it in her multicultural studies course. And I also recommend reading A Story Waiting to Pierce You by Peter Kingsley, which is a beautiful book as well, that just reveals another way in which we are connected, but it was passed over, in the seat of Western civilization, just for opting for rationality, but that rationality had supports in indigenous wisdom as well. And I also really encourage you to listen to the stories and myths of your heritages and feel how they vibrate in your bones, because this is the part of you that already knows how to nurture connection to wholeness through your human nature and connections. And so thank you for this space. And I think this is a great place for me to pause here. And I'm excited to hear what everyone else has to say.
Sam, do you want to go next?
Sure, why not? So, hi, I'm Samantha Rochite. And unlike everyone else here, I'm not a professional psychic. I work in marketing, so significantly less interesting, but that's not to say I don't have any stories to share. I began my personal spiritual practice when I was 11, 12, 13. I didn't really feel a calling so much as I went through that obsessed with Egyptian mythology phase that all kids go through, and went down some kind of early 2000s internet algorithm rabbit hole, which led me to a website on modern paganism. And that was kind of my introduction to this space right here. I was going to say specialized, but can't really say I specialized as I was only 11 or 12. When I first started, though, I did a lot of work with pendulums and aura readings. For the past 6, 7, or 8 years, though, I've been focusing more on cartomancy, specifically oracle card readings. I've also been working on developing my intuition and just the things that pop in my head. I've recently learned that a lot of what I thought was just, my conscience or a burst of inspiration may very well have been transmissions or hearing things from, somewhere else, the other side, above, deeper within, whatever you want to call it. So that was a fascinating realization, especially, in my early 30s, just looking back at my entire life and saying, oh, wait, so that one time when I was 6, oh, so that's what happened. That's been me over the past couple of weeks. But as for why I'm here with this topic specifically, when I heard indigeneity, I did immediately associate with indigenous American, Native American, First Nations. That was where my head went. And I have Ojibwe ancestry through my dad, who is also watching this. So hi, Dad. Aside from that, I do have a lot of European ancestry that I was already very familiar with: German, Scottish, Irish, Welsh, French specifically. But the Ojibwe ancestry, I didn't really know a lot about. And part of that was because my ancestors were in Canada, so they're First Nations. And that made it really difficult to just go back in the family tree, find any kind of documentation or get names. I mean, that's already hard enough to do when you're looking at any kind of indigenous group of peoples because of erasure and colonization. But when it's in another country, that's just another added layer of difficulty. But once again, the internet came to the rescue, and I was able to put together a little more comprehensive family tree, and just finally being able to put a name to those generations, to say my great grandfather, my great 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 grandmother was so and so. That was I could just feel like not a sense of completion, but like I was getting close to that. And when that began, I sort of just dove in head first, and I was doing a lot of research on like Ojibwe spirituality, Ojibwe history. I got a book on the language, and I was in college, so unfortunately I had to kind of like pump the brakes on that for far longer than I would have liked to. But I have recently gotten back into as Raina put it, the decolonization, re-indigenizing myself. And she's actually helped me with that too. So thank you. I think that's about all I've got for why I'm here. But I'm very excited to be here, and glad I get this opportunity to share and discuss.
So I do have a question for you before I move it on to Patty. You have this more recent push to discover more about your own indigeneity and from the different sides. For our viewers, what kind of shifts have you noticed so far by making that kind of shift? Have you felt like there's been any kind of major, minor, subtle, profound, any kind of shifts or changes by taking that journey?
Yeah, great question. And yes, I definitely have. I've noticed there have been moments where in the past I might have had some kind of like a trigger or an intrusive thought or something like that. Just figuring out how to push through it and keep a smile on my face. I've recently been able to put into practice some things that I've learned just about and through researching that part of my background. And instead of just using that very Western mindset of, push through it, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, or even the things that I learned in like traditional therapy, I've just kind of, relaxed and eased myself into a space where I feel more in touch with that part of myself and approaching it from that angle instead, receiving that kind of wisdom, that advice and insight, and using it to tackle those moments. And I remember one moment in particular, it was like 11 at night, so perfect time to have an intrusive thought and just not be able to sleep. And it was keeping me up. I was so frustrated. And I thought to myself, you know what, let's try something else. Just why not? What's the harm? And that was the first time I actually put this into practice. But I remember just relaxing myself physically and mentally, getting into that space and just letting my mind go where it went. And I could like smell smoke from like a campfire. And it was like I was somewhere else physically almost, even though I was very well aware of my body in the present, and just had images and words start flashing through my head. And then as I kind of came down from that, I was able to piece them together and make sense of it. And when I did, just looked at the thing that had been keeping me up and, oh yeah, that's another way of looking at it. That's exactly what I need to hear. Hasn't bothered me since. So that's just one example of something that's happened to me recently. It was And again, 11 o'clock at night, perfect timing, because I was so excited after having that moment. I really wanted to wake up my husband and tell him, but he has to get up early and go to work. So unfortunately I couldn't do that. But I was laying there just like buzzing, like, oh my God, that was so cool. That was so cool. It worked.
Good. So I think you had a response to your hi.
Hi, Dad.
So now I'm going to move on from somebody who's going to come from a completely different perspective.
Yes.
Which is what we love about SIP, is it's lots of different perspectives. So Patty, tell us a little bit about who you are. What is your connection to this process, to this particular topic, and then what you would like to share with our viewers.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Kevin, for having me on. And it's so great to see you, Raina and Samantha. I loved hearing both your stories and just heartfelt and really great perspectives. I'm going to be thinking about a lot of what you guys have both said for a long time. So thank you for that. So my name's Patty Anastasia. I'm a pet psychic medium. I've always spoke with spirit and animals from day one. And at about 5, I realized not everybody did. So my dog taught me how to cross the street safely. When I was starting to run across the street, she knocked me down, said, "Oh no, you need to look both ways," and showed me how to do that. I proceeded to tell all the kids in the neighborhood that my dog taught me how to cross the street, and they told their parents. And well, let's see, I'm 58, so you can imagine how that went over in those days. So I shut up. And ultimately, I went into medicine for a while and learned different medical fields and got kicked out of medicine. Physical issues just fell finally on my thumb, and that was it. Spirit's like, go do your work. And I've realized that what my work really is working with animals. And Indigeneity, did I say that right?
Indigeneity.
Indigeneity. I knew I wasn't going to. I love it.
Thank you. Thank you for not making me feel like a total loser. Go ahead, Patty. I appreciate it. I knew you'd be my girl.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm there for you. To me, I had to really think about it. And I thought, because I'm adopted. So I consider myself pure breed mutt. And so I don't really know where I'm from. And what my heritage is or anything, except that I know that I'm spirit and human language is second. So that's where I kind of go. But I kind of look at this as really the ability for people, land, animals to communicate on a spiritual plane, to share their messages, dangers, healing, and solutions. So for me, that is what indigeneity is. And animals bring us in the most amazing messages. And I thought this was really wild because when I had decided when I said, yeah, I'll do this show, all of a sudden the white buffalo was born. And I thought, wow, what message do you have here? And here it is. So let's see, June of this year, that white buffalo was born, white with black eyes, black nose, black feet. That is important. And Chief Looking Horse, 19th keeper of the sacred white buffalo calf woman's pipe and bundle. What an amazing ceremony that was to watch. He described the white buffalo's calf appearance as both a blessing and a warning of the natural environment, and we need to pay attention. Specifically, the calf's return brings hope during difficult times. Now, I find this with all animals is their messages are always of, hey, pay attention. This is going on in my land. And now the white buffalo, this is their land. This is his land, Yellowstone Park. This is where their ingenuity is. I know I'm not saying that right, and I apologize. However, also coming together, prophecy of people needing to come together to take better care of the earth for the future of our children. This is huge. All animals are always like, we need to come together and work together. The warning, needs to be, we need to pay attention to the ecosystem and its animals. Now, I thought that Chief Looking Horse, he said, Mother Earth is sick and has a fever. And I thought, yeah, that is so true. And so when I spoke with, I go into meditation and I spoke with the white buffalo that was born, they said that they showed me this two like plates, I guess like land plates coming together and one on top of another. And it was all bright red and kind of like lava was spilling off through it. And I thought, that's weird. I'm like, okay. So they said, this is a warning. This is a warning. Things are happening. And then when I heard that Mother Earth has a fever, I'm like, well, that kind of goes along with it, right? Then I did a little research and I found out that, let's see, the Yellowstone is one of the most seismically active areas in the United States. There's approximately like 700 to 3,000 earthquakes every year in Yellowstone. No idea. Most of them aren't felt, and most of them are difficult to even perceive scientifically, I'm finding. However, they're a result of the extensive network of faults associated with volcano and the surrounding tectonic features in the area. There's like a whole row of volcanoes underneath Yellowstone, I guess, that's very much like the Hawaiian Islands. The white buffalo said that this is a warning that things are erupting. And what does that mean? Is there going to be, I don't know, an earthquake, a volcano in that area? I'm not really sure. However, these are the messages that I get from the animals about their habitat. They are saying, this is what we need to pay attention to. And what I found even more interesting is that animals that are not indigenous to our area, like the blue whale that just came in July, right? They have a message. And they said, we're coming here because people will maybe pay attention because they're not hearing us on our land, in our area where we're at. They showed me a rift. They said that because of global warming, there's an area that opened up over by Antarctica that they were able to swim around now. And they said there's a problem because there's some kind of prehistoric toxin, they said, that's coming up we need to be aware of. So I thought, well, that's interesting. I did a little research. And what I found was Antarctica contains methane gas. It's actually a marine methane gas that's 55 billion years old. And because of its cold and the weight of the ice has kept it down. But now with global warming, it's all starting to bubble up. Prehistoric toxin gas, right? And so they said, we need to do something about this. And what's kind of scary about this, very scary about this, is that methane gas is a greenhouse gas. It's 25 times more effective at warming the planet than carbon dioxide. And so, you know, I don't know what to do specifically about this, but ironically, all of a sudden this show popped up that I saw where people were, researchers were up in Antarctica and they were finding these pockets. I forget what they called it, but it's like this sheet of white little like pocket holes. And they were you know, using like a pick to pick at it, and they had a fire. And as soon as they hit the methane gas, they would fuel it. And I mean, it would almost blow them up. It was quite amazing. And these people, their solution to this issue is to go and release these pockets. Now, this is not very safe, I can see. However, God bless them and thank them so much for doing this for our planet. And I don't know what to be done for all of this. I guess I feel this is one of the things. I feel like I am a messenger for their messages. I don't know how to get them to the right people because, well, as we know, a lot of people think that this is kind of crazy. It's like, oh, you know, and I know, I understand. It's different than what the, you know, society, the mainstream society, it's hard for them to kind of gravitate towards being able to hear spirit and verbal and written language, right? So I get it. However, the animals are really trying to talk to us. And some of the messages, I found this to be pretty interesting, is, their adaptations are what they're doing to show us how to adapt and how to change and what to do. For example, like when herds leave an area and all of a sudden they're congregated in an area with other species they don't hang out with. Their message to us, and because there's an earthquake coming or there's a storm coming. And if we pay attention to their lead, then we can hear their messages, which are, seek refuge and work together, right? How about storks? I thought this was really cool. Storks, when winters are mild, they actually stay more sedentary and they start their breeding season earlier because they know, the winter wasn't bad. They don't need to migrate. They can stay right there and they can have a longer breeding season. And so what's their message? I asked them and they said, become more adaptable to the changes in our lives and adjust based on our surroundings and situations. And, they're the most non-judgmental thing on this planet, really, is our animals, right? And I think that's the biggest message, is if we can just kind of lose this judgment that we have of ourselves as well, and open our perspectives up to be able to kind of look and go, I wonder what this animal, this blue whale over off Cape Cod is trying to tell us. What are they here for? This white buffalo that was just born. There's something to this. They're giving us messages about the land and about what's going on. And then they're modeling. I mean, we can see this. Watch some National Geographic shows and such. You can see how animals that, Darwin thought took, centuries or at least decades to change things, really change in like a few years for some animals and plants so that they can adapt and survive. And that's what we're being called to do, is adapt to survive and to do some healing on Mother Earth. And if we just sit back and look and listen and let our animals guide us a bit, we'll find the solutions. The solutions are there. So that's where I'm coming from. Thank you for listening.
Okay. So, so first of all, I want to remind our viewers, you can type a question in the chat. I'll remind our participants to, if you're not hooked into the StreamYard process, if you're just doing it where you're sharing it directly to your social media market, I do not see those messages. So if anybody is commenting or doing or has a question, you're going to need to put it in the private chat so I can bring it up and ask the panel. So guys, make sure you pay attention to your own social media. So indigeneity, I want to look at it. We've looked at it from the going back and trying to, or aligning yourself with the place your physical body came from. And so we have talked about, how we have a physiology, I would almost call it a cellular memory, where we have a way of being that may be out of sync with the way of being in the current environment we're in. Sound fair? I want to make sure I'm not misrepresenting anybody. I feel like that was more of Raina and Samantha's approach, is kind of claiming that inner wisdom that we pass on through our cellular memory of what we were like or how we're supposed to work. And then Patty talks about, if you want to talk about indigenous, we're talking about animals. They are indigenous to an area and they should be our teachers and our guides. it is not an uncommon thought, though everybody doesn't agree with it and everybody does not engage in it, of everybody saying, hey, if you really want to be healthy, only eat what grows where you live, because the perfect stuff grows for you and you're going to be healthier if you're only taking in the local stuff. Like that's part of our body's way of, being connected with the land. Now, a lot of people ignore that. And, I can't say I haven't had a banana or two, and I haven't spotted a banana tree in New Hampshire in I don't know how long. I think there might have been one here. I think a Tyrannosaurus Rex I saw kind of was like, using it as to pick their teeth, but that was a while back and my age is showing. But I want to look at it from the cellular perspective. And this is where it gets sticky sometimes for people. And I wanted to kind of sum up what I heard everybody else saying, because one of the questions that was put out that may have drawn people into talking to wanting to join us today was about cultural appropriation, which has become a huge issue. I just saw it on one of my favorite shows where a contestant was called out for culturally appropriating a hairstyle that was not in alignment with who they were, and was more in alignment with the judge. And the judge was like, frankly, I'm offended. I'm offended that you would wear this hairstyle, which comes from my people, as one of your props, and called the person out on it, on a cultural appropriation. I understand in a logical mindset that thing. The other thing I try to balance that with is, when it comes to my indigeneity, if you look at all my pictures, if you look at my videos, stuff like this, people don't look at me and think Native American. People look at I had some aunts who have now all passed on, that every summer you would think they were absolutely Native American. They had the high cheekbones, they had the coloration, I'm not going to say what they used to jokingly call them, because today it would be offensive. Back then it was normal, and I don't want to renormalize something that is offensive. But in my own journey, at a very, in my early 30s, after I first started my current business, 34 years later, is that I went to a psychic. We traded readings. We were at a slow fare, and she said, I see this person who I believe is related to you, and her name is Mahela, maybe. I'm not sure. She kind of was stumbling, but she kind of sort of got the name right, because my great grandmother was Mahela. And I had a gravestone rubbing of her on my wall, because I went and did gravestone rubbings at a very old family cemetery. And I absolutely had to have her gravestone rubbing, and was over the head of my bed for years. And I knew nothing about the woman. I knew she just married my great grandfather. I didn't have any knowledge, but she goes, she's here. And she is handing you a family Bible, but with it is also a dream catcher made out of spider webs, and a medicine bag. And she's like, it's time for you to claim all of your identity, all of your history. Well, the fact that she got a woman's name that, had been laying over the head of my bed for several years when I was younger was pretty impressive to me. It got my attention. I had not heard a lot, but then within a few weeks after that, I was actually invited to come speak at a Native American men's weekend on an island off the coast of Maine. The person who ran it was a shaman, was full-blooded Native. He had heard me speak I was there to speak on masculine feminine balance and the way of and about how important it was to embrace both sides of you. He felt like at a men's weekend that people came to, that they would that it was something that these people that came back every year, and they'd have new people come in and stuff like this, that these young men needed to hear, because so much of how tribally gender was dealt with was denied these young men as they were kind of pushed into this hyper masculine, kind of patriarchal concepts that didn't exist in the Native American. And so, like I said, the invitation came right after, and I didn't really want to do it. My business partner and a woman that I called for years, my spiritual wife, said, the more you resist it, the more you need to do it. Just shut up and go. Shut up and go. Just go. Just go. So here I am. I have had no training. I have no history. I have just been introduced that energetically to a woman who I later found out was a full-blooded Native American Micmac medicine woman when she married my grandfather, great-great-grandfather. But I didn't know that at the time. All I knew was her name, and I was obsessed with her name and her gravestone rubbing because it spoke to me. So that's still the cellular part of the memory that somehow, I look as English, Irish, Scottish as you come. No one would ever look at me and say Native. When I went to this weekend, the shamans, every one of the things that happened every year was that the shaman would go into some kind of deep meditation retreat while everybody was doing things. People would give him offerings, gifts of some kind. And he would see if Great Spirit had their medicine names for them. But the person had to give a gift and had to ask for their medicine name. That was the process. And so all these people lined up, and they were like, maybe this year's the year. Maybe I've earned the right to my medicine name. I've been working very hard. Like this was a big deal. I'm a newbie. I'm like, whatever. And this guy looked right at me and said, do you want me to get yours? And I was like, sure. Little Caucasian little boy here. Like, sure. Great. Go. Yeah, no, that's fine. I'm happy. Go. I think some of the other people thought I was disrespectful. I wasn't trying to be disrespectful. I was just really like, because everybody else had to go ask him, and he specifically asked me. And I was like, whoa, okay. Whatever. And of course, we know the ending of this story. Probably you can predict it. He had a medicine name for me. And the medicine name was Wolf Cloud. And he said he saw me as the white wolf with blue eyes, which in the moment freaked me out, because for a couple of years I had been appearing, especially in children that I worked with dream, but some adults I worked with dreams. And they would say, you were in my dreams. You saved me last night. You protected me. And I said, oh, and how did I appear? And they'd be like, well, you were this white wolf with blue eyes. But I would look in the eyes and I knew it was you and I was safe. And so for this man that I really had no relationship with and never met to come up with that my medicine name was Wolf Cloud, and that he saw an image of a wolf's head in the clouds with a bright blue eye poking it through. And he said that, that in Micmac, which was his tribal history, that this was healer upon high, healer teacher upon high, that has been sent down to the earth to be a teacher and a healer from Great Spirit. I was like, okay, so I guess I need to explore some of those Native American roots of mine. I'm just discovering that I had, that nobody talked about, that nobody gave me anything on. And I tried to spend some time and kind of figure out, and I did some powwows, and I studied with an Apache medicine woman who was full-blooded Apache, and she taught me how to do sweat lodges, and I did sweat lodges with her. She taught me how to do medicine circles, the medicine wheel circles, and how to hold the different positions. And she worked with me on that. I mean, I went and spent months and months with her at different periods of time and it was Apache, it wasn't Micmac, but I was trying to bring in, you know, more understanding. I tried to read some books. I tried to do everything. And then people started like beating me up. I'm culturally appropriating things because I have a medicine name, and I should be ashamed to use it. And and here I go. I'm one of those awful white settler people that is taking away and trying to take advantage of the Native Americans. Well, this is where we have to stop sometimes. Are there people who culturally appropriate? Absolutely. Can we tell that they're not part of this culture in this melting pot we call today? Not always. We don't know what somebody's journey has been. We don't know what their family stuff has been. We don't know. And when we immediately jump to the idea that somebody is culturally appropriating, now this particular contestant, who was a drag queen on Drag Race France, RuPaul's Drag Race France, she apologized. She had tears rolling down her face. She didn't realize it was culturally appropriating. And she apologized multiple times about it. And she felt bad. And as the series wrapped up and somebody brought it up again, she was she was trying to educate herself, and she was trying to understand it. And she just was focused on fashion. And it was a fashion that she was attracted to. But what we don't know is, did she have past lives in that culture? Does she have a strong energy line that comes through her cellular memory? Are there people that culturally appropriate as a way to take advantage? Absolutely. They absolutely exist. But there are also people who are always fascinated by another culture, which they may not have a cellular memory by, that they may want to honor or understand or go train with or go seek out the truth. The homogenization and pasteurization, and I'm going to call it the cultural genocide that both the Catholic Church and the Muslim Church committed across the world, is horrifying. That does not negate the fact that somebody may feel like in their veins that the only thing that ever made sense to them was Buddha. Well, you can't have Buddha. You weren't from the right part of the country or world. So you don't get to have Buddha. Buddha's ours. You're culturally appropriating. Bullshit. I understand that we have had very bad people that have abused marginalized communities. Being a member of a marginalized community, I can understand that. I may not look it, but if you know me, you know I am. And so, but what do I do as a member of a marginalized community? Push it in your face and marginalize your judgment in my presence, or the door hits you on the backside on the way out, because I ain't putting up with shit from nobody. But I understand that people that have the cellular memory of oppression, that also gets brought forward. But to me, as we are looking at things like cultural appropriation, I think we need to ask questions instead of statements. I think we need to go into our own intuitive and understanding and feel, is this person feeling their being as associated with maybe a culture they were not born in. Maybe they don't have the cellular memory, but we cannot deny that they could have the cellular memory and how that can play out. And then are they respectful? The other thing, kind of Paul Harvey, which none of you are old enough to remember, but you remember me and the Tyrannosaurus Rex and those bananas. Here's the rest of the story. I didn't teach feminine masculine balance at that men's Native American weekend. What did happen is, instead of teaching, I did a channeling, because I did full body trans channeling at that point. And when I trans channeled, and when I went into channel instead of teaching, which the people that brought me in were perfectly okay with. In fact, they were initially thrilled and then not so happy when they heard the messages. Was the first entities actually that I had ever trans channeled a couple of years earlier. And, you know, in 20 years of trans channeling, I did active trans channeling for 20 years. So I had a ton of different entities that during that period I trans channeled. But the first I ever channeled was the Native American Council of Grandmothers. They came through me. That was my very first thing, the very first set of entities I ever channeled. They came through channelings of mine for years to talk about the genocide of the Native American culture, the damage done. They talked about, they love to talk about the imaginary problems that you people created so you could have problems to feel sorry for yourself, instead of recognizing the problems that you were. Think about that for a second. They also came through in a Native American men's weekend to talk to the shaman and all of these guys that were trying to connect with Native American. And some of them had no obvious Native American blood, but they felt called to it. And the shaman said, if you are called, you are welcome. If you are called, you are welcome. I don't care. That man that ran that said, I don't care what your genetics tell you. I care what your heart tells me and what your heart tells me. What your heart tells you and then what your heart tells me. But the grandmothers came down a little hard on him. Said, vision quests happen once in a lifetime. You don't ever have to go on. If you go on a true, real vision quest that has been properly done for you, you never do it again. So, making vision quest profit centers and wearing designer moccasins and selling them as disrespectful to the heritage, even if you're full-blooded, I don't care what. The grandmothers were quite like, let's snap up your act. It's like she called some of them out on that they were full-blooded, but they were emulating their oppressors. And when you emulate your oppressors, you're just as bad as your oppressors. So I'll never look Native American, and people will always think if I use my medicine name that I'm culturally appropriating. And I can't change that. I can't change what people think. I don't have any. If somebody wants to know what I think with an open mind, I'll share it. And if it may shift who they are or how they think, if it helps them, I mean, that's what I do for a living for the most part, is help people become more authentically who they are and know who that is. I don't ever tell somebody that they don't get to study a way of life, a way of culture, a way of being, that they don't need to feel that I will never tell anybody, well, you can't do that because you were born in the wrong family. If you're drawn to it, dive into it, find out, see what were my past lives, what were my past experiences. Maybe I came in, maybe you came in this lifetime to bring back ancient knowledge and wisdom from a culture that you don't even have any blood share with, because the homogenization, pasteurization, genocide, murder, rape of these civilizations that happened for thousands of years by patriarchal loose cannons and greedy muddahs, none who were, I mean, every last one was a hypocrite, because Jesus never said kill anybody, but they killed everybody in the name of Jesus. Or Allah. Allah never said kill anybody either. And we all know Buddhists won't even kill an ant. So, but in that, if you are drawn, follow the drawing. You may actually be able to hear. And here's my last story, and I will wrap it up to see what questions we have or comments that the panel would like to comment or ask of each other, or questions which we don't have any waiting, but now's a good time. If you have a question you want to ask of one of our panelists, this is a great time to start typing that in. No, this whole time everybody is thinking I'm the animal healer because I am running this and I didn't even change it to my own website. Hi, my name's Patty Anastasia, and I'm your animalhealer.com. I was not raised Christian. And in fact, I was always very leery of Christianity, because it seemed like everybody that talked to me about it made me want to take a shower afterwards. So, as a channel, the first time I channeled St. Peter, Simon Peter from the New Testament, and the first time I channeled Judas, and the first time I channeled Ezekiel, and the first time I was asked, or I was asked through me to somebody who came back and said, Simon, because he always said, don't call me St. Peter. I have no respect for the organization that canonized me. Simon wanted to channel a rewrite of the 2 books of Peter through me, which I did have out on audio tape and is now actually on a book you can find on Amazon called My Friend Jesus. And that's Simon actually channeling a more accurate translation of what he said versus what we got in a much maligned, much changed, much played with Bible. But I said, why me? There are tons of people that are capable of doing transchanneling. Most of them are going to have a familiarity with Christianity. I don't even remember having a Bible in my house. Why pick me to do this? And I also wasn't very happy, because I said, all those religious nutcases are going to come after me if I start, channeling saints and angels and people out of the Bible. Judas was intense. Let me tell you that. That's a day for another story. But Simon's response to my question, which had to be asked when I was in channel, because I'd come out of channel, I'd be told what was said because I wouldn't know, and then I'd say, well, here are my questions the next time he shows up, and then they'd get asked, and then I'd either listen to the tape recording, because I have all the tape recordings from all those channelings. He said, because you have no bias, because you won't try to change it because it goes against some upbringing you had. So you are the perfect vehicle to channel messages to correct the errors of the Bible, because you never believed in it. And I only bring up this story to say somebody may have a connection to a heritage, to a lineage, to an indigenous to society or culture or group in another part of the world, and they may be able to get messages that the people in the culture who have been so colonized, have been so oppressed, have had generations of force and fear driving them away from their own spiritual connection, that they can't even go there. They can't even go there. I saw a very, it was touching, but it was disturbing, and it was on Max, and it's called We're Here. And they were talking to an indigenous person that was two-spirited, which is the way two-spirited, which and went through with that, how in there are 100% native, and how in their native culture that all of the ancient teachings were that two-spirited people were the most gifted, and they had shaman places of this, and these are people that we call today gender fluid, but they called them two-spirited. And I saw this individual in this show called We're Here talk about how when they went back into the tribal lands to teach the acceptance of two-spirited and gender fluidity and the power of the healing, that the Christian base of the tribe had them thrown out from teaching there. The Christian base of the tribe. And it almost broke their heart. And even listening to it almost broke my heart. So, on that note, does anybody have a question for each other? We have no questions coming up. So until people come up, if somebody has a question or comment about anything, what anybody else said, you could just wave your hand and come off mute. Raina?
Yeah. I feel like I have a lot of reflections. Yeah. I'm just so deeply in my heart listening to all of your processes and connections and stories. I just had a moment where I had a wave of emotion come through me listening to all of you. There's like this testimonial on my site where the person is like, she can sense the longing in your soul and connects you to the universe. And this is what it is for me. I can sense the longings, right? The global longings. And when I hear stories, I feel like this celebration for me when I hear Samantha, like engaging her natural body's intelligence that's signaling to her how to connect, with her wisdom, which is also weaving with her spirit and her connection to the other spirit. And, and for Patty, just like listening, yes, being in conversation, nurturing conversation with not just other people, but the land. The land is also part of us, right? And the animals, they're also part of us. And there's a Filipino word and concept, a core embodied value. It's not really cognitive, and I know it's not cognitive because I was never taught the word, but I can always feel it, right? It's Kapwa, and in this Western society, like my sense of Kapwa was like threads waving loose in the wind, and it was never met, right? Not until I met another Filipino who can meet it back with me. And Kapwa means cut from the same root, and another meaning is as a value, an embodied value, that's tacit knowing in ourselves. It means the shared inner self. We are all each other, right? So we are connected, and we're made to connect, not even just like cellularly, neurobiologically, right? And so I hear the stories, and right, and tuning into, you know, Kevin's story of, you know, just being in accusations of, you know, cultural appropriation, and especially where, you know, you're white appearing, right? Where you have mixed ancestry, and, you know, and that touches me too, like, you know, like also being a mixed ancestry, and also in touch with spiritual heritage, which comes from the soul memories, right? I just sense into the global longing again, and how there's just been so much like harms done, that it's through colonization, this process of dominion spreading over the earth, right, through such violence even, and cultural erasure, that, you know, these gatekeeping energies are really colonial constructs, right? It's against our human nature to connect, and so, you know, like, in terms of like cultural appropriation, is what's your level of awareness, and how can we create nurturing relationship, collaborative relationship, and just keep naming things, and try to create the connection, whatever the energy is coming through you, because and to my awareness, soul memory is also cellular memory. It's going to communicate to us through our cellular memory. You know, the Akashic records are stored in several places, one of them being around your DNA, right? And so when you have access to the information there about your soul, it's going to vibrate your cells, and there's a creator resonance there, and there's connection there. But how do we create nurturing relationship? And to my mind, wherever you've been nurtured by a land or people, and soul, spirit, but particularly, you know, the land or the people, it becomes a part of you, right? Just being nurtured, you receive the transmission of that indigenous wisdom, right? So our accessing one's body is accessing indigenous wisdom, and that's why I really feel like we all need to do our work to decolonize these harmful Western colonial constructs that keep us separate and dissociated, and it's been normalized, you know, from our embodied knowledge that we already have access to, if we can just tune back into our body wisdom with somatic awareness, if that makes sense. And so I'm really in my heart right now, feeling the heart of all, and how could we all really start to reclaim the wisdom that's in our long bodies, which is what I brought up before, is an Iroquois concept that our bodies our cells are not just our physical, you know, being right now, and just, you know, our individual cells, but it includes our environment, our connections to the past and the people in our past, and into the future, right? Yeah, and I would say even like spiritual resonance that would come from your soul memories.
Unfortunately, so often we're very myopic, and, you know, if 23andMe or Ancestry.com didn't tag you as having it, then you don't get to count it. And if you don't have a high enough percentage, then you can't have the designation. And we try to break it down to a very logical illogic of identification of labels. And this is where I go into my soapbox. I miss my sound effect. I used to have a sound effect of the creaking of me stepping up on my soapbox. It's the difference between it's the difference between a label and an identifier. And we're obsessed with labels, which is like a little box, and you only need a label if you're a box of cereal or a can of stew or something where you have a definable list of ingredients. If you are a person, all you can do is have an identification of a place where someone can start to take a journey to know who you are, or to know more about what you have identified as a opening up the first page of a book and not a label. And that's, for me, the difference between identifying labels. And some of what I heard you say, Raina, falls into, you know, stepping beyond the labels, and the importance of stepping beyond the labels and staying and stuff like that. And
could I reflect just something? I've changed my language. I no longer can, talk about myself as part this, part that, part this, part that. Those also are colonial constructs. I was nurtured, through Filipino lineage, and just through my cell memories of like my ancestors on my dad's side, and so I am all of it together. I'm all Filipino, I'm all Celtic, all Nordic, right? All English. I'm all of it. But I'm not gonna piece and parcel it out and get some, this culture has us all thinking in terms of like the blood quantum, right? That was established by the colonial mindset, right? And so those are colonial constructs, and that was defined in order to control the peoples.
Labels are always lazy thinking. And don't tell me what makes up your blood. Tell me what makes up your history. Tell me what makes you up as a person. Tell me about the experiences that shaped you. Tell me about the things that make you giggle or laugh or cry. Tell me about the things that are inherently a representation of the essence of who you are. And we're lazy. We want everything in a tweet. We want everything in only so many, and it's gotten worse. But this homogenization and pasteurization of humanity is the way where they break up the strings of interdependence and try to put you on little conveyor belt places that then they can turn people against each other, because if you're interdependent, there's no us, there's no them. And the people that are in power and in charge and in great wealth got there and stay there by stoking the fires of an us and them mentality. So we still don't have any questions coming in, which is okay. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. And this will continue to be replayed, available as a replay on New Hampshire Metaphysical. I actually am doing this on my radio show Facebook page today, as well as YouTube. And so it will be available in all of those places. What I want to do at this point is I'm going to ask people to start to give whatever their closing thoughts are. And if a question comes up, we'll jump to that question. But I want to be respectful of everybody's time on the panel too. So, Sam, closing thoughts, ideas, perspectives, and if you want to share on something that anybody else said, now is the time. But I'm spotlighting you, baby.
Actually, yeah, there is a thought that I had recently when I was thinking about, in case it came up today during the panel, and I figured it would, the like cellular versus cellular memory, and how like past lives and connection to that culture. So I was thinking, and it occurred to me that when we talk about like past lives or other lives, the focus is almost exclusively on the soul and the journey that the soul goes through. But like, what about the body? Like, it doesn't just disappear. It doesn't just poof, gone. Like, it just, as the soul goes to wherever it goes, the body returns to the earth, right? And so that got me thinking, like, the body eventually, it disintegrates, and whatever energies and elements that it's comprised of, they disperse, they go elsewhere, and can become, a blade of grass, or a cat, or, whatever. And so that got me thinking that maybe sometimes the reason people feel like that connection to a distant or different culture or land or part of the world or group of peoples isn't because of a past life that they experience there, like on a human level or even an animal level, but because the energies and elements that their physical form is comprised of at one point existed in some other part of the world. So it's still a new thought that I'm throwing around, so I don't know if I'm articulating it very well, but like it really got me thinking of like having held a physical presence somewhere and not necessarily participated in the culture or like, you know, been within the society, but what if some of the energy that your physical form is, you know, made up of was a blade of grass that got stepped on during a war or something? Or, you know, you were a tree that what if like the Bodhi tree that Buddha meditated under, what if some of that, like, you know, came into you now? You could feel a connection to that part of the world or to like that spiritual ideology simply because of what your physical form is made up of.
So you're saying it depends on where they hit the body. What? Did I hear it wrong? All depends on where they hit the body.
That feels like a very indigenous, you know, insight, you know, because in indigenous way or shamanic way, everything in creation has consciousness, is a drop of the all.
And we all know it only takes a few drops of all to clean the clothes. Patty, this is your first sip.
It is my first sip. I love it. I love it. I'm so inspired by everybody. I'm just enjoying all these different wonderful perspectives coming together. And Samantha, that was awesome because you know what? I was thinking that's true of animals too, because our animals are physical bodies. They dissipate when they pass. Well, so many people, what animal do you associate with? Kevin, the wolf. You know, I mean, this is maybe a karmic lifetime, a physical lifetime that you actually had as a wolf and came maybe, you know, like for myself, I know, you know, I resonate with certain birds really a lot. And so, you know, although the spirit animals that come, I love to watch all the animals that come into my life and just kind of like check them out and look them up and get messages. And I feel like maybe that has a lot to do with what you were talking about, Samantha, is that karmic memory, maybe we call it something like that. That cellular memory. I like that a lot. However, this has been really wonderful, and I'm loving it. And so thank you so much for including me. And I can't wait for next time.
So we've got like 5 minutes left. I'm gonna so was there a completing thought? Because you it's almost like I started with you as you talked about everybody and how they touched you and moved you and kind of stuff's going on. If you have a completing thought, because then I want to do a completing thought as well. Go ahead, Raina.
Thank you. Yes, I do have a completing thought, and that is that we have an ancient technology that is also futuristic, right? When we start to include ourselves through time, who ourselves are through time, we have our connection to the ancestors and to the descendant. We are ancestor and descendant at the same time. And the idea also is not to romanticize the indigenous, right? That won't do anybody any good either, but it's to become really grounded in what actually is. And then how are we going to evolve in collaborative relationship that nurtures, you know, that we're always in, like, as much as we can be in nurturing conversation, even if there's conflict. How, you know, how we're going to evolve into the future with possibility that includes power with, not power over.
Thank you. So I think that the important place that I would like to stop here, besides mentioning that we do have a SIP on 8/18 at 6 p.m. on animal communication. I know Patty's there. I know I'm there. I know Stacy's there. But I think we have somebody else who's a straight up, or I say straight up animal communicator. So, but I cannot remember, and I did not get a response. I didn't get an answer.
I have her name. It's Ginger Hendry.
Oh, that's right. So Ginger. So thank you. Duh. So we have Ginger Hendry. We have Stacy. You must have her on your list too. What's Stacy's last name? Patty. Patty. Go, Patty. Oh, unmute, Patty.
Oh my God. Okay. Where's
Yeah.
my little mouse?
Give me your paw. Patty.
I know, I'm looking. No, she wasn't on up yet. She was, I don't think she had decided she'd do it when I wrote this other thing up that I put Ginger's name on.
Okay.
So I don't have her last name. I'm sorry.
It's Stacy. My bad. Likely, like I said, she was a guest on my radio show, so I know she'll forgive me because I know she loves me. It's so funny, but so I do want to mention that, and I think it's important to not let, the Blooming Mystic is her Instagram handle. I remembered her Instagram handle and I remember her first name, but I don't remember her last name. Stacy, forgive me, but she is the Blooming Mystic. If you want to check her out. Ginger Henry. You can definitely find all sorts of stuff about Ginger on the New Hampshire Metaphysical, and then Patty, who is here, that you can go at youranimalhealer.com. Don't let anyone else define you. Don't let anybody else tell you who all of you is. All they can tell you is all of you that they can perceive. And if we want to start talking about limited, the majority people ability to see beyond the boxes that we were built into in our childhood and our society, for most people is a big old jump over a big old fence. Lazy. Don't be lazy. Don't assume because somebody presents as a male that they feel like they associate as a male. That if they present as a female, that they associate as a female. That if somebody feels like they're very much that they're called to be a Tibetan monk, I don't care if they're 6'2", blonde hair, and their name is, Eric Vonzing. They get to be a Tibetan monk if that's what they're called to do. You don't get to judge other people. You get to discern what your journey is, and don't let anybody else take it away from you. And don't take anybody else's away from theirs. I want to thank all my panel. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for being here. And we'll see many of you on 8/18 for animal communication. And oh, wait a second. Did we get? There is a question in the comments. Oops, sorry, all caps. Not in my comments. They didn't. Oh, wait a second. You're right. It did show up. Okay, so I'm going to put this up briefly because I didn't catch it sooner. I kept looking up there. I don't know how I missed it.
I wonder if they could complete it. Says, I have often wondered if this, and it chopped it off, unfortunately.
If you go to the Facebook page, you can see the whole thing. I think it hit like a character limit.
Oh, thanks for letting me know.
Back in my 20s, I got lost in a wooded area while hunting north of Ottawa. I didn't know there was anything north of Ottawa. I was getting concerned as it was almost 4 p.m. After walking in circles, I fired a shot in the air to see
how long I had you.
Sorry.
Suddenly, I heard a voice say, "Are you lost?" I saw the image of a Native American in 1800 style dress. He gave me directions to go over 2 hills and I would find my vehicle. When I returned to thank him, he was gone. Years later, I learned my mother's family was from Quebec. I have often wondered if this, can you finish it, Sam? You said you brought it up on the Facebook?
Yep. I have often wondered if this was a relative rescuing me. People give me a strange look when I describe this incident, but 50 years later, the memory is vivid. And I would like to address this one because it was my dad who posted that. And it's one of my favorite stories he's told me. He's got a lot of stories, but this one is absolutely one of my favorites. And so when I was working on putting together a more comprehensive family tree and first finding information on our Indigenous ancestors, I took a look at like on a map of Canada, roughly where they would have been located. And then I remember the story. I remember, and I called my dad and was like, "Hey, where exactly did that encounter you had happen?" And so he told me, and I looked on the map, and sure enough. So yes, Dad, I do think that was in fact an ancestor of ours who rescued you.
And nobody on this panel is going to look weird at you, Dad. Hey, Dad. Nobody is going to look weird on you. I was hiking on plateaus in Montana. I got separated from the group. I was unfamiliar with the area. And I just walked and walked and walked. No cell phone service. The day was hot. And thank you. The day was hot, and I was getting really upset because the sun was starting to get low in the sky, and nobody I went with seemed to notice I was missing. And my father, who had passed away a couple of years earlier, appeared in the distance and just kept waving me on, and he walked me right back to where I needed to go to get back out. So I don't think you're crazy. Anybody here think they're crazy? Thinks he's crazy? Well, you might be crazy, but you're not crazy for that.
I was just about to say that.
Okay, thanks everybody. Namaste.